Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Tonight we have a very interesting question saying, what do I do with all the information overload that I'm getting from all different sources about the pandemic? It's an excellent question. Normally, information gives a sense of mastery. We feel calmer and more relaxed the more we understand something, and it becomes less frightening. There's a desire to gain more information because somehow more information will protect us and make us make better decisions to protect ourselves. And for the large extent, there's a lot of truth to that. The problem is when you get an overload of information and a lot of misinformation. Then it breeds a lot of anxiety and fear. Right now, the internet is overwrought with conspiracy theories, misinformation, and fear from a variety of sources. It's hard to filter out what is truth and what is not. Part of the problem is the very fact and nature that a lot of the information that came out from credible sources was wrong. I'm going to share with you that I was part of a meeting in a hospital where we were given a lot of information that none of it was true. First off, that in the beginning of this pandemic, that you would only be able to catch this like SARS, that a person had to be showing symptoms in order to be symptomatic to be able to transmit the virus. This was believed. This was absolutely believed and reported originally. Happens to be it's not true. But there's a lot of things we have to remember when evaluating information. The first thing you always want to do is consider the source. The big problem is you're going to find even reputable sources having problems with getting good information. Which brings us to the second point that's even more important than the first. Be wary of preliminary scientific findings. Science is messy. It takes time to be able to see what causes what. I think many of us have learned that correlation does not imply causation. Now, for a lot of us to hear that term, what that actually means is just because there's something that looks like one thing is causing another, it doesn't mean it's the case. Supposing you give somebody a medication and you go, wow, look at this. People that get this medication get better. The problem is, was it the medication that did it? Or was it time that did it? Did your study that you people that you chose, was it a big enough sample that told you whether or not enough people would have not gotten better and the medication actually did nothing? So a lot of ways, preliminary scientific data is not something that you always can rely on. But when you're fearful and you want to gain some sort of control and you want to make people feel better, there's an aspect to jump at things. And sometimes the problem is that things get politicized one way or another. And I'll give you an example of this. There was some information that was put on about certain care that was going on in some of the hospitals. And this person was making a very strong claim. And I had no idea whether it's true or not. And I asked a colleague of mine what they thought. And they got very upset. And they dismissed it outright. This is rumor, this is this. And I said, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's true or if it's not, but I think the question being asked is a question, but not to be offended. I think a lot of times people fear knowledge on both sides. I don't want to admit to this, I don't want to hear that, and what ends up happening is we start to filter. So we don't look for the truth, we look to filter what projects our own worldview. Where I feel at times where I don't have information, so I want to pretend this is not so bad. So I'm going to go out and protest while putting myself and my family in great danger. Because the reality is this virus doesn't care whether you are a good person, a bad person, a rich poor person, or a poor person. It does what it does. It attaches, it gets you either sick or not, and continues going to pass it on. And a percentage of people will die from it. And the more that we transmit it from one person to another, the more amount of death that we're going to have. And what ends up happening is it becomes political pressure. We want this to happen one way or another. And there are no easy answers here. It's not a situation where this is the right way we should do this, because we don't know. And instead of anybody saying that we don't know, because that breeds uncertainty, you have what's done is projecting certainty, that somehow we are going to know and know the right decision. And the truth is we just don't. And the reason is because we have only preliminary scientific findings in so many things. When SARS came out many years ago, I remember that they were saying at that point that you could only get it when somebody was symptomatic. And SARS was contained very well, actually. When somebody went ahead, there was protocol for it. And I remember the same protocol was put into place when this pandemic started early on. Except that I saw that it wasn't having the same effect. And it was like right away I knew this is not the same thing. This can't be, because otherwise the numbers wouldn't be growing as they were, because every symptomatic person, we would have gone ahead and helped them to stop, and we would have cut down the spread as we did with SARS. But again, because we like to have certainty, there's protocol for testing. And when people don't meet the criteria for that testing, they didn't do the test. That didn't mean they didn't have it, because the presentation was different. And then after the fact, when things got worse, they found out that there was, and then there was tragedy. I know of many, many cases, anecdotally, where this has happened. But if you look at the numbers of people that have died, you know that that had to have happened. We are not in a situation to know all the information. So what ends up happening, our brains do what ifs. And we start to look to information sources to give us more information and more information. And that breeds more anxiety. So one of the things we have to do is pull back a little bit. Recognize we don't know what we don't know. Being okay and living in a way with knowing that we're just going to have to find out. To take a look at what information we do have and make the best decisions that we can, and realizing that we don't have control. There's no way for us to know, am I making the right decision or not making the right decision? Think about getting married. Do you think that 50% of the people walking down the aisle are saying to themselves, wow, I can't wait for the divorce? I don't think so. I think most people think when they're getting married, this is going to work out. Yet we know the statistics are about 50% of the people will get divorced. That doesn't change that when you're making your decision, that you think you're making the best one. And in this case too, we have to know what the best information is, as best as we can, and then make the decisions that we can to protect ourselves. We can't worry about the what ifs. What ifs produce more anxiety. We have to deal with what is, and you just may not know. There's no way to know what's going to happen. There's no way to know what's going to be the next issue. Stress affects decision making. And the more stressed you are, the more you are to possibly believe misinformation in one direction or another. You could become too afraid to do almost anything, and that can lead to disaster. Or you could go and say the opposite direction, and it makes you too bold, and it puts you in much more dangerous situations. The fact that these things right now are being politicized is horrific. This is not a time or a situation for a nation to be caring about a politics one way or the other. This is a situation where we need to know what the best answers are and make better decisions. During World War II, it didn't make a difference what party you were part of. We were a country fighting a war and for a cause, and we came together. And in reality, that's what we need right now. We need as a country to come together, not to be protesting and not to condemn what people are doing, but to help educate, to understand what these things are and knowing the truth, which means that we need greater knowledge, which takes time, which means that we need to have conversations, socially distancing, but still have conversations about what's going on without condemnation. It's very easy to condemn others, the you versus us, but it's us. There is no you. In actuality, this is not even a political United States issue. This is a world issue. And potentially, it could be a world issue for a long period of time. I know they talk about the idea of vaccines, and they're working on them. But nobody knows when they're going to come out. Nobody knows if the vaccine is going to work. They're going to try the best, and I hope and pray that they do. And I hope that it will be as quickly as possible. But there's no way to know for sure. Even when we get the flu shot, sometimes the flu shot is not as effective as we like to. So we don't know what's going to happen. And again, that uncertainty breeds anxiety because we like to remain in control, but we don't have it. We never had it. No matter what disaster, no matter what situation, we have to remember we can only make the best decisions we can, but we cannot control outcomes. It's not possible. I worked in the ER for many years, and I watched the best decisions try to be made by doctors, by staff, and sometimes it worked out wonderful. It was a great situation, and there was times to celebrate, and there were times where the best efforts and the best tries, and it was the wrong decision, and things went wrong. And it's sad, but we can't control the outcomes. We are blessed to live in a generation where the majority of people that are born live. But if you went back 100 years, almost every family had a sibling that died in childhood. There wasn't families that didn't know somebody that died in childhood. It was the norm. And we have now advanced in such a way that these things are devoid of the fact of this reality. Spanish flu was a pandemic as well that killed a lot of people. They survived that generation. We will survive. Now, will there be loss? I already had. And there could be more. Who will it be? We don't know. But we have to do the best that we can, make the best decisions we can, and not overload ourselves with believing that if I watch the latest news and I get the latest fact, or I get that, that's going to be the information that's going to give me some control over this. Because when you have that belief, it actually is counterproductive. And then you get the latest rumor on the internet about the next aspect. And the sad part is, it could even be true, but it doesn't lead you to any more control. We have to do the best that we can. We have to get some information to make sure that we're safe. We have to figure out how we want to live our lives. But at the same token, we also have to not cause our anxiety to become so debilitating that it makes our existence that much more difficult. So unplug. Do things that you enjoy. Live your life even now through this. Utilize the extra time that you have for positive things and positive things in your life. Build more connections and relationships that you didn't work on or you didn't have time to work on. Start taking up some hobbies or taking things time to do some of your hobbies that you've enjoyed. And I realize that you can't do things with other people, but you could do things online with other people. You could learn an instrument. You could learn music. You could learn film or any type of production. There's many other things that you could do. And your focus on things that you can do is a much more powerful and meaningful and self-fulfilling than all the things that you're going to project about what you can't do in reading the news. And all the rumors, or if this true, is it not true. Now, to ask it, that's fine. To be curious about it is okay. But don't get too involved because you can't control it at the end. I hope you found this helpful. I hope this response would be helpful to your question. I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I hope you liked the video if you liked it. And if you didn't, please leave me a comment why. And if you want to help along this channel, you can go to Subcribe-star. There'll be a link, and we very much appreciate that. Again, I wish you a good night, and I hope that you'll be safe.